if Jon wants the fight to happen today, and I don't mean like the fight to actually be fought today, but like done deal today, it could be a done deal today. It's up to him. I guess we're going to find out. We know Tom wants this fight.
Yeah,
right?
No doubt. No doubt.
We know the UFC wants this fight. We're going to find out how much Jon wants this fight.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. We're going to find out how much Jon wants this fight.
All right, so just know that when I say this, I mean it with all my heart. Jon Jones is a coward, and if me saying that offends you in 2025, then honestly, I don't know what to tell you. You know, the last video that I made about Jones was over 3 months ago, and at the time, I felt pretty optimistic that we'd have a clear understanding of when and where Jones versus Aspinall would be taking place by now, and it looks like I was right. Because just this past week, Jon reportedly backed out of signing the contract to fight Tom at the very last minute. And if it somehow wasn't obvious before, it should be obvious now that he's been giving us the runaround for the last 2 years. Oh, but he's the GOAT. Yeah, he probably is, which makes the fact that he's blatantly ducked every legitimate threat at heavyweight even more pathetic. Sure, the legacy that he carved out at light heavyweight is second to none, but his entire stint at heavyweight has been undeniably the most embarrassing case of a champion changing weight classes in UFC history. He avoided Francis Ngannou, he's avoiding Tom Aspinall, his heavyweight title is propped up by wins over cherry-picked opponents. And the worst part about it is, Dana White is directly responsible for this whole fiasco, even though he's the guy that's supposed to stop fighters from pulling these types of antics. And yeah, I'm gonna be talking about all this and more throughout this video. First, let's talk about all the things that have happened, or should I say haven't happened, since I last made a video about Jones. Well, Tom has been calling him out on what's essentially been a weekly basis, whether it be in interviews, podcast appearances, or on his own social media. Tom's taken every opportunity imaginable to get under Jon's skin, and frankly, I've been loving it. On the other hand, it has been complete and utter radio silence from Jones when it comes to anything UFC related. He has, however, been posting about his fight against corrupt medical insurance companies, becoming a co-owner of a bare-knuckle boxing promotion, and receiving a presidential coin from Donald Trump. And look, I'm all for fighters having interests and hobbies outside of fighting, but when a champion has defended their belt just one time since winning it over 780 days ago, then I don't think it's all that unreasonable for me to be annoyed. And then we have Dana just being an absolute moron for the past couple of months, where every single time he's forced to talk about this fight, he sounds like a fucking fool. Just watch this clip from an interview he did in January.
What would, I don't want to say what's holding it up, but what's holding it up?
Nothing's holding it up. It's just a matter of getting it done. You know, this stuff it's not as easy to put these type of fights together as people think they are.
What do you mean nothing is holding it up? It is held up right now. It has been held up the moment you decided to do Jones versus Stipe.
By July or something, if Jon's not committed, we kind of have to look at maybe stripping him and letting Aspinall move on.
100%. Listen, if we don't get the fight done, we move on and we make another fight.
Okay, but what does this even mean? What does move on and book another fight look like when we're talking about a title unification fight falling through because the undisputed champ refuses to fight the interim champ? Is Dana gonna have Jones fight tied to Ivasa? Meanwhile, Aspinall has to defend his interim belt again against Pavlovich, Volkov, and Gon in a 3v1? Bro, it is just crazy to me how we've gotten to this point where Jon has so clearly played Dana for a fool, and I'm sure that even Dana knows it by now, seeing as he's finally relenting to the possibility that he might not be able to convince Jones to sign on the dotted line. And now we've arrived to this week where Chael Sonnen of all people leaked the super reliable information that the UFC had verbal confirmation from both Jon and Tom to fight on an agreed upon date. However, less than 24 hours later, Chael follows up his own leak by leaking that Jon actually pulled out of the fight. And for all you guys asking me, do you really take any announcement that Chael makes seriously? The answer to that is no, I don't. As much as I love the guy, Chael is as reliable of a news source as a homeless guy on the street. But a person whose intel I do trust is Ariel Helwani. Sure, Ariel is oftentimes a weasel who manipulates what fighters say for views, but when it comes to breaking the news or having insider information, he has always been head and shoulders above anybody else. And on the topic of Jones versus Aspinall, he had the following to say.
The UFC has, based on the conversations that I've had, not in my opinion, but what I'm reading and surmising and what's being told to me is they have made every effort in very good faith to make this fight happen. I think ultimately who will decide whether or not this fight happens or not is Jon Jones. All right, they have to meet whatever number, right? That 30 million was thrown out. I believe that the UFC has met all the demands.
Well,
in a very favorable way for both guys.
So the biggest thing that stands out to me from this is how Ariel claims that the UFC has accepted every single one of Jon's terms and conditions that he's demanded from them. The most notable of which being that the UFC is willing to pay the reported $30 million that he reportedly demanded in order to take the fight. In fact, after he beat Stipe Miocic, Jon said that the biggest determining factor into whether or not he would take the Tom fight would be if the UFC would be willing to pony up the necessary fuck you money that he wanted out of them.
If I give him the opportunity to fight me, I want to be so compensated
I want to say I want that fuck you money, honestly. And
if we are to believe Ariel here, or I guess if we are to believe whoever his sources are, then it seems like Dana is willing to give Jon exactly what he said he needed in order to make the fight happen, and the fight is still not happening. In Ariel's own words, if the fight doesn't happen, it's because Jon doesn't want it to happen. And to be real with you, I don't have to be an industry insider to see that from the outside looking in, it's clear as day that Jon is the one who's stalling this out. Tom's been calling him out for over a year and a half now, and at every single twist and turn, Jon's found some sort of ridiculous excuse to not commit to fighting him. Personally, my favorite example is this one.
but if I'm being completely honest, I feel like Tom's been such an asshole that I don't want to do business with him. I'm like, bro, if you had a little bit more respect, then maybe we could have worked something out, you know, but I just don't even want to do business with him.
Yeah, Jon, it's not like you never thought any of your previous opponents were assholes, but still stepped in to fight them anyway. Also, if you really feel this way about Tom, then why don't you just fight him so that you can presumably shut him up? Not only that, this guy who is constantly bragging about his wealth is all of a sudden acting too high and mighty to do business with a guy who he'd probably sell a pretty big pay-per-view event with. And if Jon is getting $30 million guaranteed on top of pay-per-view points, think of how many more small mansions in Albuquerque he can buy with all that money. Jon can come up with every excuse in the book to not fight the interim champion of his division all he wants, but the issue is most UFC fans are smart enough to see that he's running from Aspinall, and he's not even hiding it anymore. Furthermore, Jon can do all the mental gymnastics he wants in order to convince himself that what he's doing is justifiable because he's protecting his legacy, but in my opinion, I genuinely believe that him blatantly avoiding Aspinall does so much more damage to his legacy than if he lost a fight fair and square to him. And at a very simple level, seeing as Jon built his legacy by beating legends of the sport that were all older and smaller than him, I think it's only right that he gives Tom the same opportunity that Shogun Rua gave to him way back in 2011. Like, this is genuinely a joke. The champion of the division, who's also considered the best fighter who's ever lived, is holding the title hostage because he's too scared of fighting a guy who's younger, bigger, and more athletic than him. This entire situation is such a mess, and you know what? This is all Dana's fault. Yes, I said it and I stand by it. For the last 5 years, Dana has pulled out almost every single concession in order to appease Jon to the point of abject absurdity. He has given Jon everything that Jon has asked for, and all that it's done is turn Jon into a spoiled diva man-child. Back in 2020, when the UFC was practically begging for Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou, what happened? Jon intentionally priced himself out. He started tweeting about fighter pay, called the UFC cheap, and what did Dana do? Did he call Jones out? Did he strip him of pound-for-pound status? Did he publicly slander him like he would literally do with any other fighter who refused to fight? Nope, Dana gave him a free pass. He basically shrugged his shoulders and said Jon didn't really want to fight, and then moved on as if his golden boy Jones wasn't actively running away from a blockbuster fight with Ngannou. And then when Francis finally got tired of chasing a ghost and being underpaid by the UFC and then left the company, Dana smeared him as a guy who doesn't really want to fight the best. Like, what? Jon avoided Francis for over 2 years. Where was this energy when Jon was hiding from Francis in one of his small Albuquerque mansions? Then fast forward to March 2023, Jon returns from a 3-year hiatus to fight Ciryl Gane for the undisputed title. Look, I actually like Ciryl, he seems like a good guy, but this is the same dude that couldn't stuff a takedown from Francis Ngannou who fought him with one functioning knee. Dana knew exactly what he was doing when he set this fight up. He intentionally gave Jon a tailor-made zero-risk fight against a striker with non-existent takedown defense. Now, I am definitely not one of the people who think that this fight was fixed because they somehow can't believe that Ciryl Gane could get dominated on the ground by Jon Jones, because I think the reality of the situation makes perfect sense. Like, yeah, I don't think it's all that much of a shock that Ciryl Gane got submitted in the first round by a guy who out-wrestled an Olympian. Oh, but Ciryl was the #1 contender at the time, he deserved the fight. I agree with that for the most part, but the fact that the #1 contender at the time was a dude who didn't know how to sprawl was genuinely the perfect opponent for Jon to fight against for the title. And then after the fight, Dana would constantly glaze Jones for finishing Gane in the first round, whereas Francis had to go to the judges' scorecards because Dana was still butthurt maxing after Ngannou left the company. Anyways, later that year, Tom beat Sergey Pavlovich for the interim belt, thus he was the only logical fight for Jones. Literally everybody agreed that they wanted to see the fight happen in early 2024, except for Jon himself and his little manservant Dana. All of a sudden, these two started talking about how Jon versus Stipe is the fight to make, even though Miocic hadn't fought since he got flatlined by Ngannou in 2021. And then in order to justify setting up the Jon versus Stipe fight, Dana went on one of the most bizarre and forced PR campaigns for a fighter that I have ever seen. Throughout last year, he started famously declaring that Jones was the #1 pound-for-pound fighter on the active roster, which was just simply untrue. And even the media, who's usually in Dana's pocket, fought back with him on that one.
Numbers don't lie.
Does he have pictures of you?
I saw that on the internet too. Jon Jones
You
is
could say we
active.
don't know. No, see, that's what you do. You talk over us, so we can't answer.
I apologize. You go ahead.
And then Dana creamed his pants when he opened up some UFC trading cards and found a Jon Jones card in his deck.
Ooh, Jon Jones. That's badass. That is badass. Look at that card.
That's a very special card.
It's like the king.
That's nasty. Greatest fighter in the world. We got a Jon Jones card that looks like a king. Are you kidding me right now?
None of this was accidental. This was a poorly calculated PR stunt designed to protect Jon's GOAT image while avoiding the one fight that could ruin it. And now that Jon quite literally has no other options to turn to in order to avoid fighting Tom, he's choosing to continue to avoid fighting Tom. And honestly, it is not a bad move from Jones, because what is Dana going to do or say to him after he's defended him so publicly over the past few years? Dana knows damn well how much of a fool he's going to look like if he were to all of a sudden start being honest about Jones' antics. Jon's got Dana by the balls and he knows it. If any other fighter in the history of the UFC started playing this game, then Dana would tear them a new one, but he's dug himself into too much of a hole to start criticizing Jones now. This is what you get for being so petty, Dana. Light heavyweight Jon Jones definitely wasn't able to move with this much entitlement, even when he was dominating every challenger in the division. But after Dana started propping up Jones so that he can diminish Ngannou's legacy, that's when all of this nonsense started to spiral out of control. Dana has been treating Jones like the belle of the ball for the last 5 years, and as a result, Jon's developed even more of a god complex than he had before. Anyways, Jon Jones is a coward and Dana's responsible for it. I hate this situation so much. That's the video for today. Definitely let me know what you think about Jones backing out of contract negotiations again at the 11th hour again. Should he be stripped of his title? And if he was, then what's the next step for him in his career? As always, if you like the video, then like the video. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. I appreciate you for watching and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.